I want to give an intro to serverless functions, hipster stuff. Maybe not that much anymore. So write a function, glue-driven development for front-end engineers. Come in, come in. And let me quickly introduce myself. I'm Stefan. I'm a front-end developer from Berlin, and I work for a company that is called Twilio. So in case you wonder how you can make phone calls, SMS, email, and all these kind of things, communications via an API, you can check Twilio out. And I'm just a front-end developer, right? That's what I do. And what I really love to do, or what I love about being a front-end developer, is I want to build beautiful UIs and websites. Same for you people? What I don't want to do is I don't want to set up a server. Haven't done that for years, and that is a good thing. I don't want to decide on a database. I'm not a database person. I set up Postgres, CouchDB, played with MongoDB. Not my thing. I don't want to write deploy scripts. I worked at several companies where we had huge and massive shell scripts running and syncing stuff to other servers. In total, I really don't want to deal with that. What I want is to build beautiful UIs and websites. And when I started front-end development, that is now 7 or 8 years ago, it was pretty much like this. So we had server-side languages, which was, in my case, mainly PHP. And we had front-end developers that started with jQuery and made things pretty. And pretty much on point 10 years ago, this thing happened, right? Node.js was released. JavaScript developers entered the server side. It was great. We all got tools like Gulp and Grunt, good old times, right? Massive config files. And I wanted, or I continued to build beautiful websites, at least in my opinion. And then, I hit the next problem. How do I set up, oh, that's wrongly written. How do I set up and scale a Node.js server? That's not the easiest thing to do. I deployed a few things. Node processes just die. Do you set up a daemon to rethink the whole thing, or to reset the whole thing? Do you use PM2? I struggled a lot with that. So what I did, I looked for solutions, and my solution was 6 years ago was Heroku. Man, that was pretty cool stuff. Deploy a node process, just runs. I still have one Heroku instance. It eats so much memory that I pay $50 a month for 5 years. I should go to a static site at some point. Today, we have cooler stuff around. So we had the JAMstack Meetup. Today, we have Netlify, which is a static site hoster specialized on static site. And then there's Zeit, which is also doing static, but also a lot of serverless functions. And these are kind of new services that all play in this serverless topic. And when people hear serverless, people talk about 3 different things. And I feel like right now we slowly figure it out, but the 3 things are cloud services, serverless. It could be Contentful, Airtable, Twilio, Firebase, all these kind of things, these APIs that run in the cloud that I don't have to deal with. Serverless could also mean function as a service. Coming from the main provider, there's Google Cloud Functions, AWS, Lambda, or Azure. Or developers like to troll each other, right? Or it could mean the serverless framework, which is an abstraction framework on top of serverless functions to orchestrate functions. And serverless is now around for a few years. And when do you know that a methodology in programming made it? When it made it on Martin Fowler's blog. Nailed it. So now serverless is officially a thing. So for me, it doesn't really matter if it's one of which one of the 3s it is, because for me, serverless is just use a server whenever possible, because it's usually cheaper than when I do it myself. Because when I reinvent the wheel, I have to maintain the wheel, and I'm a well-paid developer. So serverless is more an idea, in my opinion, than an implementation detail. And we front-end developers, we do that for ages anyways. When we build a website, we include Google Analytics, right? Did anyone set up here their own analytics service? I didn't. Maybe use Contentful for your content management. Maybe you don't want to set up your Postgres database and you use Firebase. Maybe use Sentry for your JavaScript error logging. I haven't set up that myself. Maybe you use Algolia for a fast search. Man, I worked at a startup. We tried several sprints to make a fast search, and we were still way slower than Algolia. And we are front-end engineers. We're doing this because you don't have to build all the time, all the stuff from scratch and reinvent the wheel. If you want to have an overview of what is out there, Chris Coyer maintains this beautiful website, which is serverless for front-end engineers. And you can find a lot of services in there when you're interested in what is out there, what you can use in your front-end stack today without building all the things from scratch. So it's this idea of reusing things and not maintaining your own servers, right? And then there was this guy from Norway. I think this is pretty accurate. This is even better than the idea. Serverless means that I'm a JavaScript developer and everything is Legos. It's just putting everything together because everything is out there. And we're here at the JAMstack meetup, so JAMstack, baby, right? So what does JAMstack actually mean? That stands for Jam, right? Sounds cool. So it stands for JavaScript stuff in the front end and maybe in the build process, which means that you ship static HTML and you enrich it with API data in the client. Then there's APIs, right? And then there's static markup. And this is great in a base idea because you can ship stuff and just use all the APIs. There's one gotcha with this though. You cannot use every API in your front end because not every API is made for public usage. So let's think of an example here. Let's say you want to have a contact form, right? In your static website. And you use SendGrid, which is a mail provider because you don't want to send mails yourself. You don't want to do that. What happens now? The hoodie hackers come. And these hoodie hackers will find your credentials and they will make bad stuff with your account. That's not what you want to do. And this is where, for me, I'm doing static sites for a little bit already, where the missing piece comes into play, which is functions, serverless functions. That's the second approach of serverless, or the second point in serverless, right? So maybe we should rename the JAMstack to JAFMstack, baby. Because there's one piece missing in this, right? Functions. And serverless functions are these tiny pieces that you can deploy to the cloud, and they could look like this. So usually it's a little bit of Node, because I do JavaScript. Then you can define a status code, bring back some JSON, and that's it. This can be an HTTP endpoint. This is super cool stuff. Serverless functions work with C#, Go, Node.js, Python, Java. I think Ruby is also on the list when you go for AWS these days. And the idea of these tiny building blocks that you can deploy to the cloud is that you don't have to maintain them. You push them and they run. I don't have to SSH somewhere. I don't have to do anything. They automatically scale up, which is cool because maybe you generate a lot of traffic and these functions will be able to handle a lot of traffic. And you're not paying them when they're not running. When I run my tiny blog and I execute a function 1,000 times, and I'm not paying for that. That's all for free. So when you look at the function providers out there, so for example, Netlify, the static host provider, offers 125,000 function executions per month for free. That's enough for your and my little side project. When you go to Zeit, that's a company that also maintains Next. They offer 5,000 functions executions per day. Or when you go to the low-level tier there, so the more tedious example on AWS, you will see that 1 million requests, function executions per month are free. So what I want to do is, I want to show you how you can use Netlify functions in the following 10 minutes. And I want to fight the hoodie hackers. So let's do this. Oh, no. Ah. All right. So what I'm going to do is I switch to my editor. Is that big enough? Okay. And I don't see my mouse. Here we go. So, and what I have here is my terminal, and what I want to do is I want to kick off npm def, which uses the Netlify CLI. Pretty cool stuff when you use Netlify. And what this now does is it spins off a new development server on localhost 8888. So what you see here is a form that is already pre-filled with my name, and I can now go away. I can now do hello, and I can send this. And what you see here is that there is an AJAX request flying to this endpoint. So this is how serverless functions on Netlify work. And this responds with a nice little message that comes here to the top. So how does it work? So when we go into the React app, we see here that this is React. This has a render function here, and it has a form. It submits to this form, and then we have handle submit. And this basically makes a post request to the endpoint and fetch the message. All right? So when I now go to the function endpoint, which is here, I can change this, for example, hello, JAMstack. And when I resubmit, that works. So with functions now, I can bring in these kind of services that I cannot use in the front end, which is pretty cool. So let's change this one. What I want to do first is I want to bring in a try catch because we're doing some real logic now. And if something throws, I want to bring in a 500, and I want to do error message here. So let's see if this works. So when I go here, throw, new error, error, oh no. We can submit this again, cool. So what I want to do here now is, I want to do two things. I want to send an email, and I want to sign the user up. Cool. So to do this, first we have to parse the request that is coming in. So let's do data, JSON stringify, event body, and let's log that just to see if it's working. So when I now resubmit this, JSON parse. Ha. So let's do that again, JSON parse. So here we have the data that is coming from the form, right? So what I can now do is I can bring in a function that is send email. This is something that you don't want to do from your client, right? Because this needs credentials, and I pass in data. So let's write this function, and I'm going async function send email. This gets some data, and I'm bringing a dependency, which is sendGrid equals require sendGrid mail, and I prepared some environment variables. These are now already in my session. These are usually in your static host stored somewhere. So what we can do now is we can pick sendGrid, and we can set an API key, which is sendGrid API key. Oops. SendGrid API key. And here we now can already send an email, which needs a few things, which is from, to, the subject line, and some text. So let's fill these with a message. So let's do message, and I want to move these in here. So who's sending the message? This will be no reply at stefanjudis.com. Who do we want to send the mail to? This will be data email. Subject line will be thanks for getting in touch. And then we have the text, which is I'll call you later. Cool, so what we can do now is we can send email, message, we return this, and this is already the first step. What is a string? Yo, good catch. Oh, I'm tired, I'm sorry about that. So, sendGrid email. Let's see if the function works. No, I think it's send. Send, cool. So with this, we have the first step done, and we're sending an email. The next step then would be to sign the user up, which will be await, sign up, and we're passing the same data. So let's write this function. which will be async function sign up. We bring in the data. And what I want to do, who has used Airtable? That's pretty cool. So let's bring in Airtable. Airtable is basically a spreadsheet as a service. Airtable. Air. Huh. Oh, I think I'm going to stop here soon because I'm not very fit. So let's bring in a base, new Airtable. This now wants an options object with an API key, which we already have available here. Let's go here. And the way Airtable works, so for example, here we have Airtable. Airtable works in these kind of base thingies, which are tiny buckets of your data. And every bucket of data then has different spreadsheets that you can fill with data, which is pretty sweet. So what we can do now is here base, and then we have AT base. And what we then can do is we can base, we grab the table, which we also have already in my environment variables. And then we can do create, which needs the data that we have here. The data already includes email, name, and message. So we can bring these in here, email, name, and message. Unfortunately, Airtable doesn't provide promises, so we have to promisify the whole thing. We get an error here, and now we create a new promise. Return new promise. Resolve, reject, and we move this stuff in. And if there's an error, we want to return, reject error, and otherwise we want to resolve. So with this, in theory, we now have the second service included in our thing. And we're not leaking any credentials. And any more errors? Yeah. If error. Let's go for that. Cool. So when I now go to my React app and I do hello, let's see. Woo! So now I'm in a static website and I can use services that basically have right credentials because I can encapsulate this in functions that I control, which is pretty cool. So when I now go to my mail client, here we go, which I think is very, very nice. Well, that went okay, I guess. So when you're doing your static site stuff, these functions are the missing glue that help you to prevent bad guys to find your tokens, which I think is very nice. And it also enables you as front-end developers to connect and reuse all the APIs that are out there. And there are a lot of APIs out there that you can just connect and use. And then yesterday or 2 days ago, what I did is I asked Twitter what people do on the JAMstack with static sites and serverless functions. So what you see here is JavaScript Confaiti, and this is their code of conduct reporting. And what they do is they use Google Cloud Functions, and they send SMS whenever someone is reporting an incident. This is not a lot of work when you're doing JavaScript and serverless functions. Well, then there's Leads JavaScript, the Meetup, and they do basically everything with serverless functions, from tweeting, from sending emails, Slack posts, creating tickets. And what I did a few months ago is my grandma recently sent me or asked me, hey, Stefan, can you buy me a cell phone? And I was like, why do you mean a smartphone? My grandma is not the most tech-savvy person, right? So what she wanted to do or what she wanted to have is that their or her grandchildren can send their pictures, right? Because that's what we do with our smartphones all the time. So what I did is I built her a static website that is connected to WhatsApp. So what you can do is that my grandma now has a tablet and she has this little button which sends all the grandchildren some messages. And when the grandchildren then reply with a media message, this automatically redeploys the static site. It's pretty cool. If you want to check out these slides, you can go to my-links.online, write a function, I own this domain and I'm still proud of this. This is a serverless function that uses contentful to fetch the short URL and redirect it to something else. There are a lot of services out there that you can use for free today and that help you to, with which you can have a lot of fun. If you want to learn what is out there, you can check out this talk. This is just massive buzzword bingo of APIs for front-end developers. That's a lot of fun and can give you a lot of ideas of what is possible. So I'm convinced that static HTML is pretty sweet. But now that we have functions, we finally have the missing glue to awesomeness to connect all the pieces, which I think is very exciting. Because now we have this big universe of static HTML, nice deployment services like Netlify, and we can glue and connect all the pieces together, which is pretty sweet. And there are several function providers out there. So there are AWS Lambda, Google Cloud, and they usually do something that looks a little bit like Node, right? Module export handler. This all looks a little bit like Node. There's also something that I'm very excited about. Who has played with Cloudflare workers, serverless functions? This is extremely cool. So on the first sight, this looks just like normal serverless functions. But what they do different is that they support the fetch events and the fetch function, which means that it looks like an environment like a typical service worker. So you can share code between a Cloudflare worker and a service worker, the same code. Sounds interesting? I played around with this and I built a project that runs the same bundle in a service worker and a client in a Cloudflare worker. So if you're interested in how far you can push this, you can check this out. But overall, I think 2019 is a pretty good year to know some JavaScript. And for example, my friend Marcos, he's a Kotlin and an Android developer, but he has figured it out. What he every now and then says is, Stefan, don't worry, I know enough JavaScript to be dangerous. And this is true. Build your site, deploy it, and connect all the dots. There's a lot of power that comes with all these systems that we have today. And yeah, I think JAMstack is not the right term. I think it should be JAFMstack. And thank you very much. I'm Stefan, and I'm a little bit tired today.